Just a loose agenda there in the chat for folks to see. Welcome, everyone. My name is Rachel Zagarius. I'm the Director of Advocacy and Development at the Cornucopia Institute, as most of you know. Also turning into a blueberry over here. I'm eating them by the handful since it's blueberry season here in Michigan. So I'd like to just thank you all for joining us today and welcome you all here in this virtual space. We're joined by panelists here. We have with us today our fearless Executive Director, Melody Morel. We also have our esteemed Director of Policy, Marie Burcham. And we're lucky enough to have a few farmers on the video with us as well. We have our committed authentic organic farmers, Cameron Molberg, who is at Greener Pastures, who's also the president of our board. And we have Kevin Engelbert here with us of Engelbert Farms in New York State. And I believe that we have Helen Keys as well with us today as well. So thank you all for being here. I'd like to just also thank our donors for being here, our supporters. We have some longtime organic advocates with us today who have been longtime supporters of Cornucopia. So we're glad that you can join us in this format here today. Thank you for protecting organic. Thank you for supporting our mission and trusting us to work on behalf of our shared values. We're glad you can be with us today. So a few housekeeping items. Since this is set up as a webinar, the participants who are not on the panel are muted and off video. So I welcome you to please use the chat to participate, add questions as we go, and please introduce yourselves on the chat, and we can have a discussion on the chat while also leaving this space here for the panelists to present without too many interruptions, and we'll see how this goes. So I welcome your feedback after this webinar as well via email, or give me a call and let me know how it went for you. We're learning as we go here. So aside from that, I would like to invite each of our panelists to briefly introduce themselves, starting with Melody.
Okay, thank you for joining us. My name is Melody Morel, and I'm the Executive Director of the Cornucopia Institute. I have worked here for about 9 years, and in that time I've followed the NOSB, the National Organic Standards Board proceedings, as well as the National Organic Program work pretty carefully. I want to start by saying that policy is a very, very long game. We do a lot of action alerts, and we provide educational materials so that people can sort of follow along with us in the regulatory landscape. Sometimes we ask for people to make comments in the Federal Register to push some regulation over the top. But most of the policy work that we do here is behind the scenes. We have a wide array of conversations. I've been busily building networks across organic. I have scientists and industry folks, growers, handlers, retailers, regulators even, that I try to stay in contact with to keep us informed so that we can have a strategy that hopefully works, knowing all the while that regulation moves very, very, very slowly. So that is why you will see Cornucopia do a lot of consumer activism work in tandem, because the marketplace moves much faster, as we all know. But this call today is about some regulation moving through, and I invite you all to engage and to contact me afterwards, or Marie Burcham afterwards, at your leisure. Thanks.
All right. We also have Marie with us. Marie, can you introduce yourself for folks?
Sure. My name is Marie Burcham, and I am the Policy Director for the Cornucopia Institute. I have been with Cornucopia for about 6 years, and I'm also an attorney with a background in environmental and natural resource law, as well as animal law. So I come to the organic practice and policy with that lens in my background. And I'll keep it short here since I've got a lot to say later, but I'm looking forward to talking a little bit more about these nuanced policy issues and welcome any questions as the presentation goes on.
Great. Thanks, Marie. Cameron, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, and thank you. My name is Cameron Molberg. I'm the board president of the Cornucopia Institute and very proud to be working with these folks. Also the co-owner of Greener Pastures Chicken, which is a pasture-based organic chicken farm just outside of Elgin, Texas. And for those of y'all that don't know where Elgin, Texas is, it's about 27 miles east of downtown Austin. So we're Central Texas. I've had, I don't know, 12 years in the organic industry, either raising pasture broilers, pastured eggs, running organic feed mills, consulting with organic producers across the state and the country, and even in some instances across the world. It just really depends. But yeah, I'm really happy to be part of this organization. And later on in the conversation, if you have any specific questions you would like me to address, I'd be happy to do so.
Thanks, Cameron. And Kevin, welcome. Can you tell folks a little bit about yourself?
I'll give it a try. Thanks for everybody for your interest in Cornucopia and taking the time out of your lives to be with us today. My name's Kevin Engelbert. My wife and I and two of my three sons operate a certified organic dairy in Nichols, New York, which is right on the Pennsylvania border. It's called the Southern Tier of New York. Actually, my sons have taken over management and ownership of the cows and machinery, and my wife and I still own most of the land and the facilities. So we are managing close to 3,000 acres now, but a good share of that is pasture and hay ground that we just take one cutting a year off from. This is our 41st year of farming organically. We were the first certified organic dairy in the U.S. And this is my 11th year on the Cornucopia board. I joined right after my sentence on the National Organic Standards Board was over. We have diversified our operation with our sons coming on. We have about 250 dairy cows at any given time. We also finish off a few pigs every year for our retail sales business. We divert some of our milk and make our own, or have cheese made out of our milk under our own private label. My wife Lisa started a farm store, I think it was 2008, and that has continued to grow every year. We offer the cheese and all our organic, or all types of cuts of beef, veal, pork. We also always have an employee that works for us, and he raises organic chickens on our farm. So we also have organic chicken in the store, and then we carry a full line of natural or organic products, as much local as possible. And then Lisa also has a delivery run where we supply a major food co-op, Green Star, in Ithaca, New York. She delivers there twice a month, every other week. And then she also has a lot of other stores and wineries that we deliver to. So that retail business has become a large part of our operation, and a way that we've tried to capture more of the consumer dollar. But the majority of our milk does go to Organic Valley. A small percentage actually goes into cheese. We raise corn and soybeans, wheat, oats, alfalfa and clover hay, grass hay, and we also have a grain business that we grind, mix, and deliver bulk grain to a few area dairy farms. At our peak, we were probably serving 12 to 15 dairies at once, or at any given time. We're down to 2 or 3 now because of all the illegal imported grain that has come into the country. We can't compete with that, and we don't even try. Plus, a lot of the dairies that we've sold grain to have sold out because of the low price of milk, the flooding of the market with the illegal milk from Aurora and a few other operations, National Prairie, I think. And, you know, it's hurt us quite a bit, but the retail business has helped us keep going. That's about all I can think of.
Thanks, Kevin.
Yep.
Thanks a lot. I also don't want to forget to mention that we also have with us today Gail Nielsen, who's our IT wizard, our director of internal systems. She's off camera today monitoring the chat, and we'll be sharing questions with panelists at the appropriate time as we go here. So without further ado, I'd like to invite Marie to go ahead and start their presentation on the current policy landscape surrounding the origin of livestock and the organic livestock poultry practices rules.
Just let me share my screen.
Sure.
All right, there we go. All right, how is my sound for everyone?
Good here, Marie.
All right. So welcome everyone. I'm going to start this presentation with a discussion about the origin of livestock issue. And just to start, you'll see here on the screen, this is some of the regulatory text, if you want to reference that at any point. So the Organic Foods Production Act, which is the enabling legislation for the organic standards, establishes in general that organic livestock have to be managed organically since the last third of their gestation. This means that animals have to be pretty much under organic management before they are born. However, there are some exceptions in OLPP for dairy livestock, requiring a minimum of 1 year of organic management before milk from those animals can be sold as organic. The regulations, which you see in part here on the screen, also specify on top of OLPP that in general livestock have to be organic before birth, but that there is a loophole within the regulations that is being taken advantage by some certifiers and producers that allows them to take conventional animals and continuously transition them into organic over a year, so that by the time they reach milking, their first freshening, they can sell the organic milk. So this graphic here kind of gives you a representation of what's going on these dairies that are taking advantage of this loophole. So a certified organic cow will give birth and begin lactation. Those calves are then removed by these dairies and usually sold, or organic management stops on the calves. This means that all that milk that would be going to feed the calves is then being sold, giving them an economic advantage. Then these dairies, if they need replacement heifers, will buy conventional heifers that have been raised on conventional meds, conventional feed replacement, and raised on conventional pastures. And they breed them, essentially, timing it so that they freshen for their first milking right when they hit that 1 year. So to compare this to an authentic organic dairy, like we have with Kevin Engelbert as an example, the certified organic cow would give birth. Those calves are then fed organic milk and they remain on the organic dairy. So they're weaned and grazed in organic pastures. If there are extra animals, those animals ideally are sold as organic heifers or organic calves, or raised for organic beef. They graze on organic pastures. And again, the breeding cycle is pretty similar here. So they're bred around 15 months and they give birth within 9 months and start their first lactation, and that cycle continues. So you can see there's a pretty clear difference here between dairies that are discarding their organic stock and buying conventional stock and continuously rotating them into their organic herds, and an authentic organic dairy that is keeping a closed loop cycle here. So this has been a regulatory issue for quite some time. Organic dairies have been asking for this loophole to be fixed for a very long time. In 2015, there was a proposed rule that offered some solutions to this problem. This was after years and years of work by the NOSB and stakeholders pushing for something to change and close this loophole. Unfortunately, the 2015 rule never came to fruition. And now, after many years of stakeholders crying desperately for some solution to this problem, the NOP has now said that this rulemaking is a priority. That 2015 rulemaking from quite a while ago has been reopened a couple times for comment. The most recent comment period closed just this week. And that again was just on the old 2015 rulemaking. We do not yet have a new rule. So as mentioned earlier in this webinar, this slow wheels of regulation are just that. They're very slow. And unfortunately, in the meantime, organic dairies are suffering. So this is just a slide to speak to some of the serious impact on authentic organic dairies. There's an economic disadvantage because those dairies are feeding their legitimately organic calves organic milk instead of selling it, loss of income from selling extra organic cattle. And I will comment on that aspect. There's almost no market for organic dairy cows because of this, because if someone can just take a conventional cow and transition them, it's often cheaper than having to continue to feed that animal organically through their young life. There's also a glut of organic milk in a lot of markets, and that price undercuts on milk sales really harms authentic organic dairies who do not have this economic boost. And another comment is that some certifiers do not allow this practice. So these are some visual examples for you. On the left here, we have a visual of Natural Prairie Dairy, which is an organic dairy in Texas that has been implicated in multiple wrongdoings, but it's likely that they are doing this constant cycling of conventional livestock into their program as well. You can see here they have a large dry lot. They've been implicated in other issues of animal neglect and poor pasturing as well. So this is not the only thing they're getting wrong. And on the right, you have an organic dairy that is well regarded in the industry. And these cattle are out on organic pasture and are in a closed loop system. So closed loop meaning the replacements are born on the farm. They stay on the farm their entire life and are fed organic milk and are not conventional at any point. So in response to this most recent reopening of that 2015 origin of livestock rulemaking, Cornucopia sent out a dairy survey to the entire list of dairy farmers on the integrity database. We intended and did send out what we found to the National Organic Program, and we plan on continuing to collect that data as more responses come in. We essentially asked what the impact was, both economic and otherwise, on not having this rule and this loophole closed. And right here you can see a little handy graph of some of the data we found. The majority found that it was a negative impact to not have this rulemaking. And I will note that the folks that responded other were just usually unsure of the exact economic impact, but most of them commented that they still wanted this rule as soon as possible. So here's some more data breakdown here that I found pretty interesting. And I also heard from quite a few dairy farmers in response to this. the largest dairy that responded to our survey had 3,500 cows, but the range was more in the realm of 1 to 40 was the most frequent. And we also had quite a few in the like middle range, 40 to 99 here in UC. Interestingly, the dairies with milking more cows reported that they had the greatest negative economic impact. And that's pretty interesting. And I think it's because those dairies have a larger market. And I think Kevin will hopefully speak to that a little bit more since he falls into that 100+ dairy cow range there.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Kevin to speak a little bit about his farm and his practices. And I also hope to hear a little bit about how this loophole impacts your operation, Kevin.
Okay. Yeah, everything you said, Marie, was spot on for all those that are listening. Her facts are very true and accurate. With one slight exception, I want to point out that they got 124 responses, Marie, from that survey.
105.
Yeah, and it says only 50% had a negative impact, but you've got to remember, in the last approximately 5 years, half of the organic dairy farms in the country has gone out of business. So if you count them in that statistic, there's been a tremendous amount of negative impact. I don't have the exact numbers. I haven't had time to look them up or forgot to look them up, but at its peak, California has lost, since its peak number of organic dairy farms, California has lost half of their organic dairies, and I would expect the same as for every other state also, and even probably more so in the Northeast and the upper Midwest, where you have a lot more smaller dairies. Like I said, our grain business, out of the 15 that we were shipping or delivering organic grain to a few years ago, one of those has gone to all grass fed, so they stopped feeding grain. Another one has gone to another dairy supplier that buys a lot of grain from all over, and I'll leave it at that. But all the others have gone out of business. They've sold their cows. They had some were planning on their children taking over, and then with the price crash and the quotas that have impacted on us, they just sold their cows. So the negative is actually quite a bit higher than that number indicates. And on our farm, as you saw in those charts, we do the same. We do just what Marie said. We raise all of our replacements. They get organic milk for average probably 2 months to 2.5 months of age, and that takes a lot of milk out of the bulk tank. Costs us a lot of income doing it that way, but it's the right approach. That's what consumers expect when you say that you're an organic farm. And then, and right now, every animal that we have that's over 6 months of age, the young stock is all on pasture. That's 100% of their feed right now. Now, if we get a dry spell, we may have to supplement with some dry hay to get them through the year. But it's a big difference when you're feeding all organic feed that to your animals. The cost is a lot lower for conventional farmers to do that. We also, as I said, we raise all of our own feed. We don't buy any. We don't have a market for any of our excess calves. We sell them into the conventional market as basically cull calves because we don't have a market because of this lack of enforcement of the organic rule, where it says you should be. There's only a one-time transition. Some certifiers are allowing these huge operations to sell those calves. If we did have a market, we'd raise more of our young stock and then sell them as bred heifers ready to freshen. But with a true organic farm like ours, we always have excess animals. We don't have to buy animals in, or we don't have trouble maintaining cow numbers. That was one of the biggest changes when we switched from conventional farming to organic. We were having to buy animals to maintain cow numbers because they were so unhealthy. And once we got our soils healthy, then we started having excess animals to sell. So this rule would has impacted us quite a bit. We would have a lot of animals to sell to either young farmers who were trying to start up an organic dairy, or to organic dairies that were trying to expand. These pictures you can, I assume, does everyone see the pictures that are going across the screen, Marie?
Yeah, they should. Yeah.
Yes. On the left, you can see that's my middle son and his son, Asher. That's Joe and Asher walking out to check on the cows. The middle picture is our triple mowing machine that we mow hay with, and you can see our stand of alfalfa there. Beautiful stand, nice and clean. And then the picture on the right, Joe got off the cultivators and took a picture of one of our fields of corn going through the last cultivation. So after all these years, if the weather cooperates, we've gotten to where we can control weeds very well with cultivating and harrowing our row crops. This year we have about 365 acres of corn, although I'm afraid we're going to lose about 60 acres of it because of the weather we've had the last week. It was the last corn that we planted, and the boys weren't able to get through the cultivation the first time, and it's on very poorly drained ground, and I'm afraid that by the time we are able to get back on it to cultivate, the weeds will have taken it over. So we can do a good job, but like I said, the weather has to cooperate. It has been up until about a week or 10 days ago. We were quite dry, and now we're saturated with moisture. Our production, we milk our cows twice a day, not 3 times a day like the huge operations the CAFOs do, and we don't push them for production. We feed very little grain, probably 10 to 12 pounds per cow per day. So we average about 50 to 55 pounds per cow. This picture is one of combining wheat last year. You can see some of the corn on the left and the wheat field obviously on the right. And we actually didn't get any winter wheat planted last fall. It was too wet. So this year we made up for it by putting in extra oats. And I think we've got around 40 acres of oats, 35 to 40. We don't grow a huge amount because we only use it in our grain business. We don't sell it bulk or separately. It's used in all our grain rations. And one other aspect of our grain business that I forgot to mention is we have self-serve grain bins where we always have grain available for either layers, broilers, pigs, or beef cows, young stock. And we have people that come in and self-bag the grain and weigh it and leave money in a box. And that's also contributed a great deal to our diversifying income to try to stay in business is that self-serve grain business.
That's wonderful, Kevin. And I would like to add on to your comment about the dairies going out of business. We always get lots of calls of folks saying they're out of business and that they're no longer milking. And I can attribute some of the no noticeable impact for the smallest number to Amish farmers, quite a few Amish farmers in that 40 cow and less grouping. And they're not necessarily aware of all the regulatory wranglings going on. So that can account for some of that data as well.
Right. Yeah. This picture was taken, I think, last August on one of the farms that we rent.
Like to take a moment and see if there are any questions up to this point about origin of livestock or Kevin's operation?
We do have one question here. Is there hope that under a new administration, there will be some new investigation of the organic board's processes by an office and or official to which they have to answer?
By organic board, I'm assuming the National Organic Standards Board.
I would assume it just says organic board here. He says yes, that's correct.
Yes, yeah, I figured. That's possible. The relationship between the NOSB and the National Organic Program is a complex one that's defined both in the Organic Foods Production Act and also the regulations. And there has been a lot of, there have been some changes to that relationship in recent years. For example, the sunset process has changed, and in general, the National Organic Program does not take the NOSB's recommendations, let's say, to heart always. There are quite a few of the NOSB recommendations, over 15, I believe, is the number that the NOP has not acted on. Whether that will change specific to the administration, it's hard to say. It would have to change probably through the Farm Bill at this point, I would say. The next Farm Bill will be up in 2 years. So I can speak more to that. I don't know if you want to elaborate on any specific thing. As far as origin of livestock goes, it's out of the NOSB's hand. It's really in the land of the National Organic Program and the USDA in general to fix this problem.
I'd like to add something here just for clarification. The National Organic Standards Board, when they look at an issue, they are actually required not to look at the impacts, at the economic impacts. This is what we've recently been informed of, that NOSB does not review economic impacts of any decision. That job is left to not really the program, more like USDA at the top. And I am actually really interested to see what Vilsack will do this time around in terms of that kind of economic jockeying. What I have observed is that USDA works carefully with the Office of Management and Budget. Now we're going really deep in the weeds, but I think it pertains to this question. The Office of Management and Budget is actually under the White House, so it's a piece of each administration's priorities, right? That's where they oversee what does this administration want to happen. Here's how much money we're gonna allow for X, Y, or Z. And when that office is engaged, there's little room for movement, no matter what NOSB would like to see happen. That's been really problematic, and we're right now working with our colleagues and others in the industry to try and suss out what other levers we might be able to push to make things happen. I guess I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, the economic aspect of the organic rules and regulations is very interesting because the organic label is unique in that it's a voluntary program. So that complicates things because the Office of Management and Budget doesn't really have anything else to compare to, and we feel they often get it wrong as far as their comparisons of economic impact, which is relevant to our next discussion as well, very much so.
Okay, we do have another question for Kevin. Kevin, do you ship your cheese? It's hard to find good cheese here in Florida. And she also says, and thank you for doing this hard work. I appreciate you and all organic farmers.
Oh, we appreciate that. Yeah, we do ship cheese. but not in the summer. If you go to our website, which is Engelbert Farms, ENGLBERTFARMS.com, you can find information and how to go about ordering. The best way is to send my wife an email, and we can go from there. But yeah, she doesn't like to ship in the summer because it doesn't matter whether it's UPS, FedEx, or the Postal Service. It's just not reliable enough. And we don't like to ship cheese in the hot weather and have it be spoiled or start to get too warm before it gets there. But during the fall, winter, and spring, we do ship. She does ship some cheese.
All right, and Gal6 says thank you. That's all the questions we have at the moment.
Okay, we could move on to the, great, Organic Livestock and Poultry Practices Rule.
Yeah, so I'm glad we had that question about economic impact, because that does tie into this whole issue. Similar to origin of livestock, the Organic Livestock and Poultry Practices, also called the OLPP Rule, is a long-standing issue in the organic regulations, because there's some mismatch between what consumers think the organic rules and regulations require specifically for animal welfare, and what they actually do require. And like the origin of livestock issue, there is a huge disparity in how some certifiers interpret those rules, especially with respect to poultry. So a couple of years ago, this rulemaking was put forward, and it included a lot of changes. It was a very comprehensive rulemaking, but the most in-depth changes were for poultry. So in this picture here, you can see this is an organic poultry house that looks very, very similar to what you see in conventional egg laying operations. So that rule, after some back and forth with comments and stakeholders, was finalized in 2017, but that rule was then delayed a couple times. And then when President Trump's administration came on, there was that regulatory freeze, and the rule was eventually withdrawn entirely in 2018. There were many reasons cited for this withdrawal, one of them being that regulatory freeze, but there was also some economic reasons cited, because the rulemaking would have included standards for outdoor access for hens and poultry that would have had a supposedly significant impact on some of the largest players in the organic industry, which to the mind of most stakeholders was a good thing, because those producers do not actually give their hens outdoor access. And in most stakeholders' mind, that is not true to organic ideals. This rulemaking had very broad stakeholder support. So there were over 47,000 comments in the Federal Register that wanted this rule to go forward. It did have some flaws. It wasn't perfect, but the community was still behind it, because it was pretty, it was better than what we have, essentially. And there was hope that it could equalize the playing field a little bit for poultry producers in particular. So some of the key provisions spoke to this issue of porches being used as for outdoor access in laying hens. So again, this is a picture of an organic barn, and on the right you have what folks call a laying hen porch. So these screened in, often concrete or gravel floored, I mean, it literally is a porch, are being used to qualify outdoor access in the standards. So unlike other livestock, specifically ruminant livestock, poultry do not have provisions for pasture access, or outdoor access is poorly defined. all they have is the requirement that they have year-round access for all animals to the outdoors, shade, shelter, exercise areas, fresh air, clean water for drinking, and direct sunlight suitable to the species, its stage of life, the climate, and the environment. So while that sounds pretty nice, some certifiers have been allowing these porches to qualify for their outdoor access year-round. So what is new in this realm is that the administration has said that they want a new OLPP rulemaking. It's very likely that we're not going to get the same rule that was finalized. We have been told by Vilsack that it's likely going to be a new rule with some updates, possibly changes from what we saw before. We're crossing our fingers and hoping that it's an even better rule than the final rule that was withdrawn. And here on the screen, you'll see some of our policy priorities we're going to fight for when that new rulemaking is published. Again, it's going to be a very complex rulemaking. And I will add that there are also a lot of welfare updates for pigs, which, similar to poultry, do not have the same requirements for pasture or other more defined outdoor access requirements like ruminant livestock, because pigs are monogastric. So you'll see some requirements for pigs that we're also hoping to fight for on the bottom there. The biggest things we want to fight for are, of course, to outlaw the porches, because that should never be equivalent to outdoor access. We want outdoors to be better defined, to include access to the soil, and that soil should have vegetative cover. And there are environmental reasons for that, along with animal welfare reasons for that. We want to emphasize socialization, and the socialization for poultry is complex. They're social animals, and in barns where there are over 200,000 birds, that does impede some of their natural socialization behavior, because they're just, it's a flock that it's too bigger than what is natural for them. And we also were hoping to define spacing requirements for poultry. One of the criticisms we had with the old final rule was that the spacing requirements, while better than nothing potentially, because right now there are no spacing requirements for poultry, we hope that the spacing requirements will be better in the upcoming rulemaking. And I'm hoping that when Cameron discusses his farm and practice, he can talk a little bit about spacing. It's very complex for poultry because we obviously love producers that use chicken tractors and move them frequently. But most of the industry that produces eggs and chicken and turkey use fixed houses. So there's a wide range of different production practices in the poultry industry that will make it difficult to have a perfect rulemaking that will cover all of that. So very complex and exciting potential rulemaking in horizon. And I'd be happy to answer any questions about the old rulemaking or what we're hoping for the future. But I would like to first pass it over to Cameron to give some information about greener pasture stripping.
Yeah, thanks, Marie. So Greener Pastures, again, is just located east of Austin, Texas. We've been around, the farm was really conceptualized in about 2015, and we started really producing in 2018, 2019. So we're a pasture-based system. And so, we raise the chicks in a brooder, which we'll see here in a little bit, and for the first 3 weeks. And then after 3 to 4 weeks, if it's a wintertime, it might be 3.5, 4 weeks before they go out on the pasture, just because we need their down feathers to develop and for them to be able to fully regulate their own body temperature. So that's typically why we'll brood chicks for, pretty much any producer will brood chicks for 3 to 4 weeks. But by looking at the photo on the presentation, you'll see in this instance, actually, this is a short video. We can actually, I'll describe it a little bit first. but we have water lines and automatic feed lines, and the birds are out on grass. They do have a shade canopy above them. The sides of the house actually roll up and roll down to improve ventilation, give more access to sunshine and whatnot. But essentially what we're looking at here is birds out on grass. They're exhibiting natural behaviors. They're able to, the one, you can see the rear end of one of them to the right, but that's them with their head down looking for bugs and scratching through the grass. And those are behaviors that every chicken and a lot of poultry want to exhibit, but they can't in a lot of the factory operations. So in those porches, you see in a layer house, you're not going to have the birds scratching in the dirt, and they're not going to be looking for the bugs. They're not going to be exhibiting any of those natural behaviors, which ultimately increases stress. Stocking density is really important. The OLPP did say, depending on what the function of the bird was, whether it was for layer or for a broiler, and the spacing requirements were a little bit different, but it did set a floor, and I believe it was 4.5 pounds per square foot per broiler. And so what that would mean, at least in this age, for these birds that you're seeing right now, is that essentially we could have maybe 2.5 birds per square foot. So that stocking density is still a little too tight. It really should be higher than that. So that way, you really start allowing for, 2 to 3 or maybe even 4 square feet per bird. And another thing that's really important is just maintaining the vegetative cover. One thing that is core to the organic movement is and really one of the foundational aspects of it is maintaining soil health. And by doing so, and by improving soil health, I mean, if you have too many birds in one spot, you're going to denude the grass and ultimately have a barren pad, which is not good for the environment. The last thing Mother Nature wants is barren soil. That's an indication of a problem. So the OLPP did address some of that in some ways, not as robust as I'd like, but I would like to see that maybe future revision indicate that birds would need to be on at least maybe 50% vegetative cover. But so by having the birds out on pasture, we mitigate so many problems. OLPP, stated that, some of the welfare components are you can't debeak, you can't trim the beaks, you can't clip the toes, toenails or toes, you can't cut their combs and cut the, there's a whole bunch of physical alterations that it would prohibit, which part of the reason why any of those alterations are there, or better yet, are utilized in the industry currently, it's a remedy to a problem. So if the toenails or the nails on a chicken grow too long, it's because they haven't been able to scratch in the dirt. And just like a rabbit's teeth, if they're not able to gnaw and stuff, their teeth are going to get too long. The same thing is true for the nails of poultry. If you have them in close confinement, one issue that they're going to have is that they're going to be overstressed and they're going to start pecking on the other chickens and start cannibalizing them. So what industry has done to alleviate that is to cut off their beaks. So you can see it's a cause and effect, but the ultimate direction of the way the industry typically works is not by solving the underlying problem. It's finding a Band-Aid or sticker approach that would kind of gloss over it temporarily. But Maria, if you want to click the video just real quick, it's just a couple seconds. And it might be a little loud and maybe be a little choppy, just depending on the internet. But yeah, you can see, the birds are out and about. We have ventilation, shade cloth, we have misters. We provide them everything that they would need in an outdoor space. The house moves every single day, maybe every other day, just depending, like for a group this size and the age, they're not going to have a huge impact on the soil. So we're not too concerned about moving it on a daily basis. We move the houses based on the vegetative cover. So that's the exterior shot of the house. It's a 2,080 square feet. It's basically a mobile building. We have gas, water, and electric throughout the pasture. I like to equate it to a mobile home park for chickens. And, that's how we pretty much operate. We do have a lot of, it does cost us a little bit more to produce a truly pastured organic bird than it does a factory farm, but we're fairly competitive. Our pricing might be 5 to 10% more than some of the big factories, but at the end of the day, we're wholly committed to producing birds in this kind of fashion. That picture on the right is our brooder. That's where we raise all the chicks, and in front of the brooder, that's the office. Small office. We give the chickens a lot more space than we give ourselves. But yeah, I think we could greatly benefit. I think organic producers and consumers would greatly benefit if the OLPP was reinstated or modified, and everything that Marie advocated for. We strongly, true organic producers are all on board with that. The main economic impact that I don't see a negative economic impact for the small, medium-sized poultry farmers as a result of the OLPP. In fact, I think there would be a huge economic boon for the true organic producers out there. So I would really like to see that come back into play.
Yeah, thank you, Cameron. One question I had for you specifically was, whenever we speak to the USDA about this issue, they're very concerned about these large poultry operations, most of which, by the way, most of the large players in organic poultry that produce a lot of eggs and a lot of broilers in very conventional-like means, most of their market is conventional or cage-free or free-range. So they're not actually totally bought into organic anyway. But the USDA is always concerned that some people just won't be able to adapt and will be kicked out of the organic market. So I don't know if you can comment on that. Are you worried about consumers not having access to organic chicken and organic eggs?
No, I'm not. I think it's the large producers that are like you see in the dairies right now. You see a lot of the small independent dairies going out of business because you have so much fraud on the large scale dairies, either not obeying the pasture rule or importing fraudulent grain. And so when you're working with small independent farmers, whether family farms or not, you have a lot more, the infrastructure is more built out. You have more resiliency. You don't have, like at the beginning of COVID, when there were shortages of meat products and other items, it's because we have this highly industrialized, centralized system that is overly reliant on just these 3-4 key players in the industry. So we're really shooting ourselves in the foot by catering to the large industry producers, and by one, leveling the playing field, that helps the pricing, but it also it makes it more economically viable for the small family and medium-sized farms as well, because they can compete against industry at that point. So it's not, again, like my farm, we produce maybe 24,000 birds a month, and you look at Sanderson or Tyson, Purdue, they're producing millions of birds a day. I mean, and we're on 35 acres. There's no reason why I should be the only organic pasture poultry farm within 800 miles of here. And that's really one of the most shocking things to me, is like, I'm in Central Texas and the closest pasture raised organic farm is like in Northwest New Mexico. It would take me over a day to drive there. So, we used to see more producers, but we see people not going, coming into the organic industry like they used to, just because, they can't compete. They know it's an uphill battle, and not many people want to take that risk. So, yeah, I mean, I could see by leveling the playing field, yeah, there's going to be some economic impact on the larger producers as a result of the way they've set up their houses. they're probably going to have to build new facilities and convert everything else into conventional or natural production, which is completely fine because it's exactly what it is. We like to call it organic by default. The only thing they switch out is the feed at that point. But anyways, yeah, I think we could see actually an increase of production across the United States if we were able to level the playing field.
Yeah, that's my feeling as well. So we just need to convince the USDA of that. So I just wanted to briefly mention that we do have scorecards on our website, which I'm sure all of our lovely donors already know about, but those can help support these really good farmers in the meantime, while we're waiting for the slow regulatory process.
All right, we do have another question here. Many of the comments have revolved around certifiers, and I assume the differences between different certifiers and their interpretations of the rules. How are certifiers regulated or overseen?
Yeah, so the certifiers that are overseen by the National Organic Program, essentially the certifiers regulate and certify the farmers and the producers and the handlers, and then the National Organic Program accredits the certifiers. So it's an interesting relationship between those, but a certifier can also get non-compliances just like a producer if they're doing something wrong. And there is a complex way that the National Organic Program does enforcement actions on them. And they are reviewed as well. It's very similar actually to how organic farmers and handlers are reviewed in some respects. So there's like a very much, you have to have a paper trail and lots of internal policies and but in general, certifiers often are allowed to interpret vague or non-existent regulations in their own way pretty freely. And that's one of the issues that we continue to work on in the regulatory sphere.
All right, we do have another question from Helen, but we're having some trouble getting her unmuted so that she can ask that question. I'm not sure if she's still there. And I don't know if it would be of benefit to the group here, but Jacek had asked a good question earlier on, which Melody answered in the chat, but he had asked, can BILSAC determine better outcome measures, which would include economic impact? Can everybody see that, or do we need to read the question? I'll just read the answer, just to make sure everybody can see that. The USDA ascertains economic impacts of each proposed rulemaking performed by USDA agronomists. Historically, the agronomists have undervalued the costs of continuing without regulation and exaggerated the costs to industry of completing rulemaking. Anecdotally, I suspect that the cost analysis is heavily impacted by the leanings of the administration. For instance, it appears that the USDA undercounted the costs to certifiers of implementing the Strengthening Organic Enforcement Rule, a rule that would begin to address fraud and that has a lot of support from the administration and Congress. And then we have a couple of thank yous for our information. And Jacek comments that your information about administrative factors being important to what measures are used is consistent with his experience working with regulatory bodies in the medical field. Same process there when dealing with pharmaceutical company pricing.
Yeah, it's a very complex system and unfortunately very much influenced by politics as well. So I just wanted to add, you can see both Melody and my emails on the screen here. Feel free to contact us if you have any follow-up questions that may occur in the future.
And thank you all for hanging in there. I know we went just a little bit over. Are there any closing remarks, Melody, that you'd like to leave us with?
I just want to thank everyone for your continued support of our work at Cornucopia. It's a long slog and the regulatory work is complex. So thanks for joining us. And thanks to our board members who joined us as well. Thanks a lot, Kevin and Cameron and Helen. I know you're all really busy. It's much appreciated.